Hello, everybody, and today we've got something different for you. We're going to be exploring a challenge that was raised by one of my clients, and they asked me a specific question, which I'll share in a moment. But first, I want to introduce Graham. Graham's one of our senior consultants, colleague, and friend. So, welcome, Graham.
Thanks, Ricky. Good to be here.
Okay, Graham. So you've been on quite a few of our YouTube videos. You're a star of the show, but I wanted to bring you in particularly because we have lots of experience between us. We've both kind of been there, seen it, done it, experienced lots of different situations in our careers. I think that's fair to say. Probably over 30 years between us. 30 years each, I would say.
Yeah, so I think it's probably closer to 60 years, which is really scary. But yeah, I think you're right. We've been there, done it, haven't we? We've been in management roles, in team leader roles, and then we've moved on to help managers and team leaders do some of the stuff that we've faced ourselves.
Yeah, and that's what got me thinking, particularly around this question. So I was sat having a beer, as you do, and senior leader of an organisation, a large bank, one of the major banks in the UK, and he says we've done all the training. He says we've invested millions in training them on management skills, psychological safety, radical candor, but I have a problem. My team managers in particular are not having tough conversations, particularly with those that are not performing at the required level or expected level. He says some are, and guess what? They're the ones that are actually delivering. They're the ones that are actually performing. And you kind of go, well, there's probably no surprise in that, in all honesty. So what I wanted to do today was, using your experience, Graham, using some of my experience, is dive into this and explore in a little more detail. Now, I had some ideas which, we talked about before we came on here, that was around perhaps a series of tests, perhaps checks and balances, if you will, that managers can use to help them to position these conversations a lot more simpler, a lot more easier, and a lot more effectively. Let's work out what's happening, and let's set them up for success. That was kind of my aim here.
Yeah, I know. And part of our kind of early conversation was also around that. The person you've been speaking to who has this. We've done all this training. Why aren't the managers, or why aren't people therefore doing what we've trained them in? I think is a classic thing that I've seen over the years in organisations I've worked in and organisations that we've helped and supported, where it's like, we've ticked a box that goes, people have been trained, and probably put nothing in place that supports it or follows it, or not enough in place that supports and follow it. So you do end up with, I guess, that typical bell curve, isn't it? You end up with some people who they've enjoyed it, they've got loads from it, they want to go out and do something with it. But you get others that go, well, I've done the training and therefore I'm done. I don't need to do anymore. And you got those people in the middle who kind of struggle through and muddle through a little bit, trying to do the best. So yeah, I think it's a common. I know this one particularly is about kind of management, leadership, people in those kind of roles. But I think any training, you see the same challenges where training's done, tick the box, move on to something else.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, and maybe we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. But I think the place to start here is what we talk about a lot with clients that we work with, is this concept of the expectations chat. That's what I kind of call it. This psychological contract that exists between a manager and a team member on how to handle those times where either both of you fall below the line in terms of what you've agreed as expected behaviors of each other, really. And this is not, I want you to do, 10 widgets a week and whatever it might be. This is about our relationship. It's a psychological agreement that says when we fall below the line that we've agreed, we're going to call each other on it and we're going to have a conversation.
When we talk about expectations chat with people, is I think in so many organizations, there's almost this, as a team leader, as a manager, as a leader, what your role is to tell people what to do, and tell people how to behave. And I think, we see it. I mean, it's a good time of year, isn't it? December, January usually is a busy time for people doing performance reviews and all that kind of stuff. But I think what I like about the expectations chat that I think feels different, and I think we get that feedback from people about it feeling different. It's the turning it on its head a little bit and going, it's not just a one-way conversation that goes, here's what you need to do and here's how you need to behave. It's more of a conversation that says, imagine you're my boss and me, and kind of us sitting down and having that conversation, and you going, okay, Graham, here's what my expectations are and what do you want of me? And me going, well, Ricky, for me to get the best out of me, it's some of this stuff as well. And then, as you say, we agree on that. And then, I fall below it, you're going to call me on it. And I think, again, that's common in organizations that, well, it's common that managers should do it. Whether they do it is a different matter, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of that stuff. But also the flip side is going, you might be my manager, but I've got the ability to call you on stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that if you're going to do this, always start from their perspective first. So if you're the manager, give them the freedom to say what they want from you, particularly in terms of, when you're doing well, how would you like me to let you know? Because some people, the worst thing you could possibly do is to is to celebrate their success in front of everybody, because they go, that just gives me the cringe. It just doesn't work for me. So this is about caring a bit more deeply about your people, understanding what drives them, what motivates them, and in regards to that, you can then tailor your approach. What how would you like to know when you're not performing? When I'm not delivering what you expect of me, whether that's in terms of support, coaching, development, or challenge, I want you to let me know. And most people, when faced with the question that says, so how would you like to know when you're falling below, will go, just tell me. Because the last thing I want is to be drifting along thinking everything's great and you're unhappy in some way, shape, or form. And as you quite rightly said, this is a two-way street. This is not a one-way street that says I'm going to lay all the expectations at your door and I get a free pass because I'm the manager. It's not how this
Yeah, and
works.
I think the feedback piece, we talk to managers, don't we, who kind of go, and I find that these are difficult conversations, is giving feedback to team members, and you kind of almost want to go, but what makes it difficult? Because if you have these kind of agreements in place to start off with, surely it's your starting point. In my simple world, your starting point is, we agreed this and it's not being done in whatever shape or form. So therefore, we need to talk about it, and then you get that other bit going, but I can't have that conversation with my manager. But again, why not? And I think it's because people don't have this kind of this psychological contract. They don't have that agreement that goes, we can call each other out. And actually, if I'm going to call you out, Ricky, how would you like me to do that? And tell me, to your other point, tell me as soon as you see something. Don't let it drift, because if you let it drift, it's in some ways, I think it's almost saying whatever the behaviour the person's doing is, therefore it's okay. So they plod along doing what they're doing, thinking everything's all right because no one's told them otherwise.
Well, that reminds me, one of our HR director clients says, she always uses this phrase, you promote what you permit. So by not challenging somebody in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it, you're basically
Yeah,
going, it's okay. That's fine, because I'm not prepared to put myself in a conversation which calls you on it. And the whole point of this expectations chat is it's about that
yeah,
permission up front. This takes away the how do I raise it concerns. It takes the how are they going to react.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
already agreed that up front. So why
Why are you
aren't
doing
you pressing that button that
it?
says
Yeah,
I need to talk to you? And I get that this is harder from a team member standpoint because you've got
yeah,
authority bias playing out. You've got a team leader who controls the narrative as far as your career as far as your promotion prospects, as far as your, development and investment of time in you, um, that actually are going to influence the way in which they step into that
Can
conversation.
hear Oscar,
Can you
yeah.
hear Oscar? You must be able to see
Is
a
he having an
dog going by the
expectation?
window.
Is he having an
But
expectations chat, is he, with somebody?
he's having an expectation chat. Would you like to come and play? Okay, so is there anything you want to kind of round up in terms of expectations? It's this psychological contract. It's about permission. It starts with them, and then you can then have your say in terms of expectations. But really, this is about how we're going to raise it, where we're going to do that. And in fact, we've actually got a video on this, haven't we, Graham, that we pulled together to help have this conversation. So there's a lot more information in that video if you want to go and watch it, and we'll put a link in the description below for you.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered the main things. Then you've covered it nicely in that summary. And I think I guess the one word, you mentioned it more than what we've mentioned it more than once. It's about agreeing this. So it's not me imposing it on you. It's not you imposing it on me. It's us having a conversation and agreeing it. And it's that bit, I think, that when we talk to managers about this, they go, "Oh yeah, I've not thought about doing that." I think sometimes it just makes it feel like it's going to be easy for them to go and do. That me telling you what you need to do feels like that might be a difficult conversation, but us sitting down, having a conversation and agreeing the way forward somehow just feels a bit easier. So no, I think we've covered that nicely.
Well,
and I guess it's then what do we need to agree? How are we going to move forward with that?
yeah, and I think the most important thing in this is the hardest part of having a tough conversation is the bit where you've got to start the conversation. You've got to go, have you got 5 minutes? Just want to talk to you about some stuff.
Yeah,
It kind of goes that in theory, you must, well, in theory, you should be able to step over that barrier, that obstacle, which is imagined, by the way, because often most people go, why didn't you tell me sooner?
yeah, yeah,
And so I think this kind of this mindset that we create in our heads that says I can't raise it or it's too hard, they're going to kick off, they're going to cry, they're going to do all this emotional response. When in most cases people go, that's really useful, I can do something with that.
yeah, yeah.
So I think it helps get over that kind of initial perceived barrier that raising this is going to be difficult.
So when we're having the expectations chat and we're looking at kind of gaining clarity, what are the things then that we need to be thinking about, Ricky?
Well, I think one of my favourite expressions is around this concept of the Holy Trinity,
Yeah,
and what I mean by that is this relationship between three things, which is the what, the why, and the can I. When we start with the what we're really looking for is, do team members have absolute clarity? Because
yeah.
if they don't, what are they aiming for?
So this is where we get into the area smart, isn't it? Where, and I think this is a bit of the three, the what, the why, the can I. I think the smart bit is a bit when you work with people, they go, oh, who knows smart? Oh, yeah, I know smart. And you do okay, what's it stand for? And everyone goes quiet because no one's quite sure what they all mean. But it's probably the bit that people are most familiar with, would you say?
Yeah, I think it is. I think 90% plus of people recognize smart. They've all come across it, particularly in the environments that we're used to. So we work a lot
Yeah,
in the corporate world where smart is a foundational element of goals and training. What's interesting is that the R always causes some consternation
yeah.
because is it realistic? And for us, we
Is
go,
it relevant?
is it achievable, realistic? What's the difference? So we like
Yes.
to very clearly demark those in terms of, A is absolutely the achievability bit, but the R is relevant. And ironically, guess what? The A and the R are part of the why and the can I part of SMART. So we like to break it down into SMT and then deal with the A and the R. And ironically, the R is so interesting to a lot of our audience that even Cambridge University pull down an article on a regular basis. It's one of our our most downloaded pieces of content, where actually we talk about the R in smart, and
Yeah.
therefore we give some clarity about it being linked to relevance. But essentially, this what piece is all about: are your team members clear? Can they play back what's expected of them in 4K clarity? In other words, can they describe to you in a way that you're comfortable with? It doesn't have to be your words, but in a way that you're comfortable with, that they get it.
Yeah, yeah, because that's the again. I think for me, that's always been the starting point with somebody when you're reviewing performance or giving feedback or whatever that might be. Is you kind of going, what was it we agreed to do, and by when? What was it going to look like when you got there? So I think that covers, as you say, really nicely the SDM and the T of SMART, and I think that's probably the easier of the conversation. And then you drive into, the achievability and the relevance piece. And I don't know, for me, sometimes I think almost the relevance piece feels like it should come next in terms of, okay, so why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? What makes this important?
Yeah, and I think why actually it comes across several areas, of course. So there's the big why. Why do we do this? Because organizationally, if we don't do this, we're either going to hit the mountain, we're going to fail, or we're actually going to position ourselves as a market leader. We're actually going to steal a march on the competition, whatever it might be. There's a higher business reason why we're doing this. And of course, when you work for, perhaps, the Oxfams of the world, that purpose is really clear. And actually, when you look at something like Coca-Cola, their purpose is actually, we sell fizzy drinks to create this money that we then reinvest in our communities. So the fact they're selling this drink and allows them to use their profits in a particular way, and one of which is improving um, the local communities in which they operate and serve. So even something that feels highly commercial can still have some,
Yeah, yeah,
some more meaningful relevance if that altruism is part and parcel of what drives you. And some of us, we're quite happy. I do this, I get a bonus, I'm happy, I can take the family on holiday or do whatever. So I think there's multi dimensions to the why. That's what's in it for you. Well, you do your bit and we'll pay you on the 15th, 20th,
yeah,
21st, 31st of the month, whatever it may be. We'll also give you a load of benefits that come with it, like paid holiday, and we'll give you access to a whole world of benefits depending on the type of corporate you work for. But they
yeah,
create an ecosystem of value that their employees can have. Oh, and by the way, if you're off poorly from time to time, we'll pay you for that as well.
yeah,
When you look at it through a team lens, it's then about success and recognition. What does the team get? Well, we get to be recognized as number one in the region, in the country, or wherever it might be. And I think the one area, the one purpose element, the why we do this, particularly if you're in a business that has customers, and there's not many businesses that don't, whether you see them as customers, if you're a local authority or a housing association, you might see them as either tenants or residents or people that live in the community, but fundamentally they're customers. They're using your service. Well, what's the purpose with regards to your customer? Is your role to deliver the best possible customer experience you can? And how does that differ from elsewhere?
yeah. And I think you mentioned earlier as well. I think the other thing that ties in with all this for me is that kind of that personal motivation piece as well. And we've been in, we've worked in organisations, and my challenge at times has almost been that my personal motivation and purpose not being aligned to organizational motivation and purpose. And I think it's part of that conversation as well, until it gets to that deeper motivation that goes, Graham, you need to do this because it's in your job description is not going to
Yeah.
inspire me. But let's talk about, part of the expectations chat. Let's talk about what is it that drives you and how can we link that to what you're doing and or the overall purpose of the organization. And that can be really powerful when we get it right.
Absolutely, because the consequences when we get it wrong is what you actually chose to do, which was to walk away. That says this doesn't
Yeah,
align with my personal values. And by the way, that's okay, because whilst it's disappointing we lose somebody, particularly, because I was part of the business when we lost you, and that was, it's
yeah,
gut wrenching for me personally, but actually, you know, you got to go, what's right for Graham? Because the business
yeah,
will continue to
yeah,
survive. There'll be others that we
yeah,
can bring through, but what's right for Graham? So either
yeah,
either we don't fit, and that's okay, because
yeah,
we're not pretending to be something just to make you happy. The organization exists for a reason. And if you stay a part of that, we'll invest in you, we'll invest in your development, and we'll pay you on those days that we talked about, and we'll give you these additional benefits. But fundamentally, you know, we exist for this reason. We're not apologizing for that. And you either buy into that or you don't. And if you don't,
yeah.
that's cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and so we've got the clarity around the are we clear, all the smart stuff. We've got the check around the why piece, the motivation
Yep.
piece. So then the third part of your Holy Trinity is the can I piece, the confidence piece,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So talk us through a bit on that, Graham.
Yeah, I think I mean there's a whole host of stuff out there on confidence. I know we've got other videos on it as well, but I think for me it's that belief that says, so this thing that I've agreed in this time frame, and I get why it's important and why it's important to me. Fundamentally, do I believe I can do it? Do I believe I've got the skills to do it? Do I believe I've got the time to do it? How confident am I that I can deliver this thing in the time frame that we've both agreed on? And I think it's that piece. And again, I think it's perhaps sometimes we expect people to make the motivation purpose link themselves in
Yeah.
organizations, and we don't check often enough in terms of, okay, we've agreed it, how confident are you can now do it? And like I said, confidence, I think for me can come down to any number of things. Even we'll go back to how we started this session in terms of the have I been trained to do it? Have I got the basic skills to be able to do it? If I have, am I confident I can apply those skills to complete whatever it needs to complete? So I think confidence is one of those checks that gets missed, in my opinion, probably too many times.
And what's interesting about confidence is often it's what's in here. Um, it's about my perception of my ability to deliver what you're asking of me. And it's interesting how, we all know confidence is a roller coaster. There'll be days where you think you can achieve anything, and there'll be days where you believe that
Yeah,
whatever you try, you're not going to achieve a single thing. And it does go through these cycles. And it's about, as a manager, helping your team when they're up. Let's celebrate. Let's learn. What was it about that created that kind of condition of success for you, so we can rinse and repeat and keep you flying? But equally, if things aren't happening the way we want, well, what is that? What's the self-talk going on
yeah,
in your head? How are you talking yourselves out of this? Because, how does somebody go from a performer to a non-performer? What's changed? Is it confidence, or is it a lack of purpose? The value shift has changed, or it's become decoupled from what you thought it was. Is it because you're busy working on this when actually you should be working on that? So the whole Holy Trinity brings this together and goes, have we got the fundamentals in place that mean we are setting ourselves up for success? Or, as I always like to say, are you leaving it to chance? Uh, because the
yeah,
wing and a
yeah,
prayer method is not one that I believe is successful very often. If
yeah. Even though there are plenty of people who convince themselves it works,
Yeah,
and it works for them, and therefore it will work for
but I
others.
think the important thing here is, from a team leader or team manager perspective, is you might believe they can do it, but if they don't, there's a disconnect. So you've
Yeah,
got to
yeah,
tease out what's their level of confidence they believe they can do what's being asked, what's going through their heads, what reservations, if any, might they have, what concerns might they have, because they might be genuine concerns that you're going to pull resource from me, you're going to change my target part way through, you're going to ask something very different of me that I wasn't expecting, because you might have done that before, because it might have happened before, might have happened somewhere else. But they carry that
Yeah.
recalled experience that informs the way in which their confidence is formed. So the reality is, confidence can't be assumed just because you've seen them do it. Actually,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they might have been struggling like hell to make it happen. And the other thing about all of these three, the what, the why, and the can I, is you've got to test them regularly. You can't just
Yeah.
go, I've done it, I've told them, and I know I've made this mistake millions of times, where I come back and I go, but they know what to do. They know how to do it. I've showed them, I've told them, uh, and it frustrates you, because you think there's
Yeah.
this, are they just doing this to get on my nerves? Uh, and the reality is, it's all on me. As a team manager, as the team leader, it's on
Yeah.
me. Have I checked that they know what's expected? Have I checked, or have I reminded them why this is important? And reminded them that they also have some reason to do this as well, to your point.
Yeah.
And where's their confidence? And we use a really simple trick with confidence, which is a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being no confidence, 10 being complete confidence. And we're not
Yeah.
necessarily looking for a 10 out of 10, but we are looking for kind of 6 and above, more belief, doubt that
Yeah.
they can go and
More
do
belief
this.
and doubt. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
recognizing confidence goes down as well as up.
Yes, yeah. So if we've had the expectations chat, we've had that level of clarity around the what, the why, the can I type stuff. Um, some people still underperform though, don't they? So those things are in place. We've agreed how we're going to feedback should underperformance happen. But let's touch a little bit on underperformance then, Ricky, and what kind of, if you like, tests can we do, or what checks can we have around underperformance?
It always boils down to 4 things that says, do they have the knowledge to do what's being asked of them? Do they know how to do it? Do they know what the process is? Do they know what their products are? Do they know what systems to use and how to use them? Do they know who makes what decisions in the organization and how to get stuff done? That's all wrapped up in the knowledge piece. And more often than not, we make some real assumptions that they'll kind of figure it out. They'll learn as they go. And you go, well, that's great, but what if they don't? And what if that takes them months? What are you doing to limit their performance in the short term while they're figuring it out? The next element is skills. Can they do what they've been trained to do? And then the third part for me is always about the environment, which is about 2 things, which is about the tools to do the job. Have they got stable Wi-Fi if they're working from home? Have they got a laptop that actually works and can work at the speed that they want to work, as opposed to frustrating the hell out of them because it's just slow? They can't have more than one app open at any one time. It just crashes on a regular basis. Give them the tools to do the job, because the cost of a 500 quid laptop or whatever you want to spend, I guarantee, is cheaper than the wasted time and productivity
Yeah.
and frustration that they're experiencing. Then it's also about, within that environmental element, the culture. Have we created a culture where we're not putting too much pressure on them, that actually it's starting to limit their performance because they're more worried and they're not free to perform and get on with it and do stuff? Can they be vulnerable? Can they, do they feel like that you as their team managers got their back? So if they're getting, into perhaps some mental spirals, they've got this rumination going on, like, I can't do this, it's too hard, customers are always saying no, whatever it might be. How do I feel like when those things are happening, you've got my back? Because if I don't, I'm going to go into my own shell, and I'm probably going to withdraw, and I'm probably going to decline quickly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the final element for me is all about willingness. It's if you think about the 4 areas, it's about, am I prepared to step up? So this is on the team member. So the first 3 about me as a team manager. Have I created the conditions for success? Now it's up to the team member to step over the game line, step through the door, however you want to
Yeah.
describe it. But are they prepared to turn up? And what we're really looking for here is a mindset of growth mindset. Do they learn and grow? Do they learn from their failures? Do they get up and go, right, so what happened there and how can I use that to improve going forward? Because you can learn from success and from failure. And it's also about attitude. You can really tell whether somebody wants it or they don't, because you have a conversation, and you see this is probably the most challenging in remote working conditions. So where you've got people either out in the field, remote salespeople, remote engineers, field service type people, or where you've got home-based office, they're doing customer service or sales roles. You know, the challenge for any team manager is we can do the expectations chat, we can do the Holy Trinity test, but somehow there's a disconnect between having those conversations and then seeing their performance a week or a month later, and you're going, well, that's not what I expected.
So, like I said, I think part of that is around, and I don't know if we've lost some of this as we've kind of moved to more hybrid working or two people being more home working, but having almost a purposeful check-in with somebody, isn't it? It's really common for people to go out on field visits with someone and use them as a coaching opportunity, to observe them in action. But actually building in the regular check-ins that go, okay, so we've agreed some stuff. How's it going? How's it feel for you out there? And I think we seem to have missed a bit of that, or we're missing a bit of that, in terms of the hybrid working piece, or where we'll book in a session to talk about something specifically, perhaps a particular customer or a particular challenge that we've got, but we're perhaps not doing enough of just doing a little check-in with somebody. How are you doing right now? How are things going? We wait till the end of year review or the half year review or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that makes me think about how difficult team manager roles can be, because there's this drive for performance expectation all the time. What are you doing to get them to do a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more? And actually we use some of that we lose some of that human connection, as you've just described, that actually leads to some of that culture for them to thrive, that goes, if I'm feeling vulnerable, I can externalize that, and I know that you've got me. I know that if I'm saying this is tough, you're not going to judge me. You're not going to see me as negative. You're not going to see me as somebody who can't do it. You're going to go, okay, let's work with that then, because clearly there's some unhelpful self-talk that's getting in your way. Let's see how we can clear that, and enable to free you up to go and perform. And the challenge team managers have is they get caught betwixt and between. One of my old clients always used to say, he calls them the jelly layer, because they get squeezed from the top and they get squeezed from the bottom, because they've got a demanding team that wants more of them. They want the support, they want the guidance, and perhaps want them to make some decisions that they're not confident making. And then they get senior management going, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about them? Why are they not performing? Why are they not performing? So they kind of go, well, all the messages are performance chat, performance chat, performance chat, which actually means that there is less or no time for so let's understand what's going on here, and let's really understand what are we doing that's limiting you in whatever way, shape, or form. What do you need in order to clear the decks and move forward?
Yeah, and I think what I like about that, it is quite often I think in organisations it gets boiled down to really simple. It's a skill will conversation, which is focused on the individual. Whereas what you're talking about here is going, actually, there's some stuff for me as a manager to think about around the capability piece, in terms of have they got the knowledge, have they got the skills, and what can I do to help facilitate that. From the environment piece, what's the environment like that I have some responsibility and accountability for, and how I create the right environment. And if those two things or the capability of the environment aren't right, then actually the skill will conversation becomes almost less important as a first check because the basics aren't in place. And then you get to the willingness conversation that you've just talked about, and you kind of go, so if I'm not performing, then and if we've covered all of those areas, where do I go? And I think often it's that we do boil it down to, well, it's they can't be bothered or they're not trained. And I think it's a broader conversation that, as you've highlighted, or as we've highlighted there.
Yeah, but think about,
Yeah,
let's take this at the most basic level, knowledge, because that's the easiest thing to deliver. And actually the team member can get involved in acquiring their own knowledge. Most organizations have the ability to do self-directed learning, to go and find out and discover, particularly
yeah,
on certain elements. They'll need to go and do the e-learning that means they're compliant, and with health and safety and whatever other rules and regulations they need to do. But I imagine you, if I say this, you'll probably go bang on, and that happened to me. That how many times have you been called out for not knowing something? And it might be a procedure change. It might be,
yeah,
we don't stack the files here now. We
yeah,
stack them over there. And they'll go, and you go, I never know about it. And
yeah,
they'll go, well, we sent you an email, and it was on the 21st, and it was at 10 a.m.
yeah,
and you clearly saw it because we got a read receipt or whatever it might be. So, and what that, if we treat every email or every message, whether it be Slack or chat or, Teams messaging, if we deem
yeah,
that as I've sent it, therefore it is, we run a massive risk. And this is more than team managers, this is an organization, because where's the test? Where's the test that says, have you got it? Do you understand it? And do you know what that now means for you? It's almost going back, expectations, Holy Trinity. And do you know why this is important, by the way? Because the reality is, people are not, in my experience, are not sat there waiting to be told what to do next. They probably have a to-do list or a level of
yeah,
activities that exceed the time available to do them in a particular day, shift, or whatever. So when we just layer on, so when I send you an email and I go, but I sent it, yeah, and you've missed
yeah,
it, and you go, you know what, I did miss it. So I can be vulnerable about that. And you might go, actually, you know what, I should have checked in to make sure you were comfortable with what I was asking. But now
yeah,
multiply
yeah,
that by probably 100 times, where in a big complex corporate, everybody in every different department's going, we've got some change that we want to send out, and we've emailed it and we put it on the internet and we've revised the process. What we've not done is built any checks and balances in,
yeah,
or any consideration for the individuals to check they've done that. So team managers you can act as a filter for them to help them understand some of those elements. But of course, how many team how many team managers today are manager doers? So therefore, they're part of the problem and the solution too.
yeah. That reminds me of years ago now. I was with somebody, and they'd sent something out that was quite complicated to a team, and I'd done some interviews with part of the team prior to developing some support for them. And I asked this particular manager whether they wanted to include this stuff in the training. And she went, well, we don't need to because I've sent an email, told them all what to do. And I put on the bottom of the email, if you've got any questions or concerns, come back to me. And no one's come back to me, and therefore they're all doing it. And I was like, that's a massive leap to make, to go from no one's come back to me, therefore everybody is doing it. And I said, from the people I've talked to, not a single person is using it because it's too complicated and they don't really understand what they're doing. So I think you're right. We do assume from a communication point of view, because I've sent it and no one's come back to me, they've all understood it. So I think there is more work we can do to check in around that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, just imagine that the success of that is on you, Would you want to leave it to chance, or
Mm.
would you want to create some checks and balances that ensure that
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
A, consumed, understood, and a change has been affected as a result? Because if not, you're in the wing and a prayer approach.
Yes.
And the reality
Yeah.
is, poorer departments, poorer managers, poorer leaders will argue they've done their bit, and it's the responsibility of
Yes.
the individual. And you go, well, if your success depends on it, I'd
Yeah.
perhaps be checking in, because I think it's
A bit more. Yeah.
lazy and I think it's just disrespectful to blame them and not take some accountability for it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And if we follow to that underperformance thread through, then, and we start to talk a little bit about this, and it's kind of where we started off. The people have been on training, and therefore they know how to do stuff. We touched on skill. Will, if we talk about competence, then, so let's assume everything is in place, and we move on to the competence piece, which I guess your basic question is: can they do it? Are they able
Yeah.
to do it? Um, and training in my experience, and I know you've seen it over the years, Ricky, as well, training seems to be the solution. We've got a problem, therefore let's stick them on a course type mentality. Is training the answer?
Well, the answer is to some extent. And the other question is, it depends, because if we've already trained them and they're not doing it, to put them back on a training course is not necessarily the best use of time or resource or money, by the way. But I think the bit that gets missed here, and I learnt this lesson painfully as a leader in my corporate life, but I see it repeated, that managers believe they've been trained, therefore they come off this production line ready and raring to go. And what that does is absolves them, because they've given the training, and therefore that ticks the box. And you've had the training, so therefore you should. Whereas for me, it's part of an ecosystem that says training is a solution to a problem. Now, that might be a gap, it might be a performance issue, it might be that we've changed something, but there needs to be a reason why I'm going on this training.
Yeah.
So what are you trying to achieve? So what are the goals here? Does my line manager prepare me before I go on that says, right, you're going on this is why you're going on it, and this is what I want you to come back with, and this is what we're going to do when you get back. And then when you get back, what's the support and coaching?
Yeah.
How do I know that I'm now left to kind of muddle through because I didn't quite get that bit, and that bit made no sense to me, but I didn't feel like I could say that and look an idiot on the training, so I thought, well, I'll work it out when I get back. Problem is, before you know it, time has elapsed. And I think the Ebbinghaus effect is well known, that within a week you've lost, if not all of it, certainly at least 80% of what you've learned. So therefore, have we set the post-training activity up so that they can apply what they've learned? And I think the
Yes.
mistakes I was part of and repeated was, we've got a new manager program, we've got a leadership program, where what we're going to do is we're going to pile everything we can think of into this program. We're going to make it really experiential, really interesting, really exciting, and then we're going to let you go with no follow-up, with no support, with no
Yeah.
implementation about how do you get to apply all those things. So you're kind of fighting this. What's the right approach? Is it modular? Learn a bit, apply it, embed it, learn a bit more, apply it, embed it. You know, I don't know what the right answer is, because of course organizations are doing it
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
efficient, to be effective, to use their training budgets at the best way they can. But the reality is, I imagine a large chunk, and I'd hate to put a percentage on it because I haven't done that research, but you go, I just wonder what the real cost of training is, because we don't set it up right. We don't get leadership bought into, this is the way it works if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck on your training investment.
Yeah. I think the thing that's always amazed and frustrated me in the various roles I've done over the years is when managers send people on training courses, which is normally how it feels for people, but don't even sit down with them beforehand and have that conversation you've mentioned about, okay, you're going to learn some stuff. Let's talk about what you're going to learn. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about how it links with your development specifically. And by the way, when you get back, we'll have a conversation that goes, so what did you learn and what are you going to put in place? So even that really basic take in, and it might only be 15 minutes before you go and 15 minutes when you get back. But managers still aren't taking, in my experience, still aren't taking the time out to have a really basic, here's what you're going to do, what do you want to get out of it? Now you're back, what are you going to put in place type conversation, let alone anything else. So it's like saying there's no great surprise that within the space of a week, most of it's been forgotten.
But you go, to what extent are leaders setting their teams up to fail? So they kind of go, we've leaned this to within an inch of our lives. We can operate on kind of the minimum requirement in order to optimize the margin, the return, etc. But the problem then is, now you've taken out layers of management, and the leaders that are left, or the manager doer type roles, are both doers and managing, and don't have the time to do this. So what gives? And the thing that gives is the people that they're working with, the people that work for them. That's the easy thing that will, Graham, we will do your review tomorrow. We'll do your training brief, debrief. We'll do that on Thursday, and we'll do that, and of course that never happens because the world takes over and business just happens, and we go, oh, we really should have done that. In the meantime, all the knowledge has fallen off a cliff. They've applied probably 5, maybe 10% if you're lucky of it. So they are retaining some, but not enough. And leaders, it comes back to that underperformance piece. What's the environment we're creating? How are we creating an environment where our managers can manage and invest proper people time, so that they can care about their people's success? I'm not saying they have to be friends. I'm not saying they have to like each other, but they have to care about the success of their individuals, because their individuals ultimately add up to them achieving their goals. The team managers add up to achieving the region, department, or whatever, the organizational goals, if you extrapolate that back up to the top. So actually you start to see that these are interrelated. And of course, the competence test kind of ticks into that capability box. It goes, have we got people fit for purpose that can do what we need from them? And if not, is that on them or is that on us? And my default is, what are we not doing that could help?
Yeah. And I guess the flip side of all of the stuff we've talked about so far is kind of going, then the team member then has a role to call some of that stuff out. And we talked about in the expectations chat earlier. Does that, though, always assume there's psychological safety in the team to allow that to happen? Is there like a test around that as well, that goes, we need that in place, otherwise all this great stuff is still not going to get called out by individuals?
In short, I think yes, the answer is clearly absolutely, but I think it comes from the foundation that says you can train people on psychological safety. You can give them information, knowledge. They can read, they can watch videos. I mean, the Amy Edmondson stuff is brilliant. And one of the things she talks about is psychological safety it's not a free hit. It's not something that means we accept underperformance. Quite the opposite. What we're saying is, in a psychologically safe space, we can externalize the issues and factors that are limiting our performance. We can openly discuss failure and error rates and all of those things. And of course, there's those loads of helpful articles and examples of where it's really, really played out. But I think, how do you know you've got psychological safety? I think there are 3 questions that would help from a team member standpoint. If you're looking at your team members, when did they last ask for help? And
Yeah.
I mean, not just can you do this for me, not can you talk to so and so for me? That's practical help. This is
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I need your help and support. When did they last ask for that? When
Yeah.
did your team members last admit they were struggling or had made a mistake of some kind? When did that last happen? Um, and when did they ask for specific development coaching on an area they were finding tough? So not only had they identified it
Yeah.
themselves, but they said, "Can you help me do this? I'd like you to sit with me, observe me, you know, spend some time with me to develop this particular area that is of concern." And the reality is, if Fred did this last Friday, and that's the only example you can recount, it's not psychologically safe. Now, Fred might
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
felt safe in that moment to do that. But
Yeah.
what were the circumstances around that? Was he under pressure? Was he in a corner? This is about proactive seeking of support, help, and admitting where I'm either struggling or have made some mistakes. Um, and I think there's
Yeah.
also the flip side of this, which is also about confidence from a manager's standpoint. How do they behave? Do they show vulnerability in front of their team? And when you and I were growing up, this was not the done thing. You had to exude
Yeah.
confidence. You had to
Yeah.
exude this control. I'm in control. I've got the answers. I know it all. And of course, for me, that was the scariest thing ever. The fact that I had to not just know my job, I had to know my team member's job as well. And you go, but how can I know it better than them? And and actually,
Yeah.
coaching was a real it arrived at exactly the right moment in my career because it meant that I could start to ask questions and use their knowledge to boost my knowledge and be able to reflect that back and develop them. But but managers today need to be able to show their team that they make mistakes too, and more importantly, they own up to them. And that the other element of managers, particularly team managers, um, more junior, but maybe not, maybe senior too, that there's an ego about being part of that leadership group, whether it's smaller
Yeah.
leadership responsibilities or you've got big leadership responsibilities. And by that, I mean organizational affecting roles, not just team
Yeah.
affecting roles.
Yeah.
Um, and do they show that vulnerability? Because you kind of don't want to show that you're the weaker of the, what does nature say happens to the weakest? They kind of get eaten, don't
Yeah.
they? Or they get attacked in some way. So actually, you've got psychological safety when these things are happening. Managers are vulnerable. They're showing it openly. They're admitting mistakes when they make them, and also showing how they went about fixing it or learning from it. That's a really good, powerful message.
Yeah.
And they're not looking to outdo each other. And of course, this is not easy. None of this is easy. And
No.
that's why it's a
No.
series of tests, checks and balances, if you like, that help teams to kind of deal with some of the things that are not the normal. These are how do we get under the surface and work out what's going on with our people? How do we set our teams up for
Yeah.
winning, for succeeding, for delivering what's expected of them?
Yeah. And I think you're right that, again, in our careers, I think you're right. There's been a move from managers to be I can't show any weakness, I can't show any vulnerability, and all that kind of stuff. I think there is increasingly a move to be more open. And again, some of the teams we've worked with, you see that openness paying dividends. You see managers creating psychological safety without probably even knowing that's what they're doing because they are willing to, open up if something's gone wrong or share a story from their past where they've learned from something, and then the team's going, okay, well if they can do it, then I can do it. And I think, I guess back to kind of where we started this, we can train people in here's what psychological safety is. We can run, exercises and things and go, here's how you create psychological safety. But it's one of those things that actually it's definitely got to be led by the manager, hasn't it? Or you say actually organizationally, what's the culture organizationally that supports that allows me as a manager to be vulnerable and therefore allows my team to feel that's okay rather than it being perceived as a
And I
weakness.
think, that's really interesting because as a manager, as a team manager, um, particularly in a big organization, you are a very small cog in this big system.
Yeah,
Important because if you don't do your bit, there are some knock-on impacts. But the reality is, you might believe that you can't influence the big picture when actually we would always go, well, okay, let's control the controllables then. Let's work on what's within your gift. You can absolutely create an environment where your team members can feel vulnerable, feel safe, can fail, and not repeatedly, but can learn from that failure, can grow and develop and become better tomorrow than they are today. That's all within your gift.
yeah,
And you can set an environment that makes that happen. What you can also do is you can demonstrate that that makes such an impact on your team performance that your manager, your line manager, might want to know a bit more about how you do it too. And all of a
yeah,
sudden, every change starts from somewhere. So be the change you want to see. Don't wait for the organization to change because it won't. If you're waiting, control what's in your gift, make your environment. And guess what? One of the key parts of underperformance is the environment you create, the culture of your team.
yeah,
So create a culture that you want your team to feel that they want to be a part of, so we don't lose great people like we did when you moved on, in that example you shared earlier. you know how do we keep the people and make it feel like this is the right place for them? Yes, they might outgrow you, and that might be a development piece. And
yeah, yeah,
when you also peel all of this back, one of the stats, and you see conflicting information, but one of the stats that is common is that people leave managers, not jobs. And if
yeah,
that's true, and there's a caveat around the if, but if that's true, then surely the investment is helping anybody who manages people to get these tests, these checks and balances, however they choose to do them, to effectively go, have we got our ducks in a row? Are we set up to win, or are we set up to lose and fail?
yeah. So I guess we've covered a lot of ground in all that. If we were to kind of summarize and put it together and think about where I would start with all this, do I need to do all these tests? Is it all, do I often try and put everything in place? What can I do going away from today that goes, these are some of the key things for you to consider?
Well, and I think the simple answer is it depends, but my sense is not. What we're saying is, here's a set of useful tests to think about. Um, but I would always start with with three in particular, and I would start with, it's a new year. We're early Jan. Let's reset expectations. So this is a gift really, because you've either done
Yeah,
them and it's an opportunity to reset them, revisit them. Did they work? What did we need to do more of, less of? How do we make this more effective going into this year? And if we hadn't done these before, well, guess what? You get a free
yeah,
pass. You get to start again, and you
yeah,
get to agree with your team. How do we get the best out of each other? That's the conversation I always start with. Is if we're gonna be successful together, how do we get the best out of each other? And that requires
yeah.
you to give me feedback, and it might be from time to time I have to give you some feedback. Let's talk about how we do that. And that
Yeah, and that might be things continue, might it? It could be anything.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, when you do this, it gets on my nerves, so I'd rather you not do that. And when you do this, I really enjoy that because it gives me some fire in my belly and it moves me on and all of that stuff. So I think step one, get your expectations in line or agree them if you've not done it before. And New Year is a brilliant opportunity to do
Yeah,
that. So it's either a reset or a set, depending on where you're at.
yeah, you're right. Yeah,
And I think the second element for me is about the test of the Holy Trinity. And I think the thing for this is do it now, new year, new start. and this could be a new month or a new quarter. It depends on what your
Yeah.
cadence is. But every opportunity you have to check in with your people, find a shortcut way of doing this, but says, are we still clear what's expected? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah is not clarity. Paint done for me is what Brene Brown would say. And what she's saying is, play back to me what you believe success looks like. And that then will tell you whether you've got a disconnect in terms of expectation. You
Yeah.
know, remind me from your perspective, why is this important? Because of this, this, and this. Don't forget this and don't forget that if they've missed some. And then I think in terms of the confidence level, this is a really simple 1 to 10. So based on your goals right now, where are you? 1 to 10. 10 being high, 1 being no chance. Well, I think I'm a 4. Oh, that seems to have dropped since last time. What's changed? Let's
Yeah.
set some time up to talk about that. Unless you've got time there and then, let's deal with it. But if you've not, don't let it fester. Get in on it and deal with it quickly, because that's telling you your success criteria is likely to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
And then the final part of this is have a look at last year. It could be last quarter, and run it through the underperformance test. Not because you're underperforming, but because it's a test of, are we set up to succeed? So in other words, really simple. Do my team have the knowledge to do the job? Do they have the skills to do the job? Have I created the conditions, the environmental factors for success? So in other words, do they have what they need to do the job? And do I create an environment that they can lean on me, talk to me, challenge me, share with me if they need to? Excuse me. And then finally, part of this is, are my team showing the right mindset and attitude to want to succeed? And if they're not, this isn't just tell them to get on with it and sort it out and it'll be right. Let's work out what's the rumination, what's the self-talk that's
Yeah.
holding them back. And I think if you start with those three, I think that will give you a really solid platform going into 2025 and beyond. And that's a repeatable exercise you can do every month, every quarter,
Yeah. Yeah.
every half year, and going into 2026. It's the same principles that exist, but of all of them, Holy Trinity, test, test, test. Are they clear? Are
Yeah.
they
And
understand the why? And do they have the belief they can go and do it?
yeah, and I think the other thing I've just taken from that kind of summary there is that you've got an opportunity to reset or set, depending on where you are with somebody. It's not just January. It's not just every quarter, is it? It can be on an ongoing basis, a little check-in and going, okay, how are we doing? Do we need to reset some expectations? Do we need to mutually give each other some feedback about how we're performing and all that kind of stuff? It's not, and I think this is my learn over the years. I probably like most managers, performance management, appraisals, whatever we call it, was a January thing and a December thing. Beginning of the year, you set expectations, which was normally going, these are the targets we've been given, therefore these are your targets. And then the end of the year was and how have you done against it? What I learned over the years through coaching and other techniques is that doesn't work. There's such a big gap between January and December. And I worked in an organisation where you do it quarterly, and then you realise actually quarterly is probably not enough either. And then of course you mature as a manager and as a leader, and you go, what I need to do is just have that kind of a purposeful conversation regularly throughout the year, whatever regularly looks like. And for some people it might be every week, some people it might be every 2 or 3 weeks. It's about knowing your individuals. But that you've always got a chance to set and reset at any time
Yeah,
during the year.
and I think it's about whether you build we call them tests, but they're very loose in
Yeah,
that sense. But actually, how do we build some routine around these things so it isn't on predetermined milestones, i.e. end of the quarter, end of the month, end of year, or whatever. That, it's why weekly check-ins, if done well is the key criteria. If they're done well, will actually be really powerful, because it gives you an opportunity for people to say, I'm struggling, I need this. And you might not be the one providing the help as the team manager. It might be actually one of your colleagues has got the answers, and is struggling with that, and they found this way to overcome it, and that might be brilliant. Well, let's use the internal intellect and experience in order to solve some of these problems. Let's not assume it's all on me as the team manager. And you only get that by creating an environment where people feel safe and can open up around some of these areas and challenges. But that's about building in this cadence of check in. And actually, when I was running a large call center, for a financial services organization, we had daily, because the world could change. We could have flood of calls in the morning and perhaps nothing in the afternoon, or a lot less, more manageable. And all of that would change the dynamic. It would change the pressure points in the team. And you've got to work out, how do we release some of that pressure so that they can perform at the best that they can? And so, your environment will determine how you see this working in there. But
and I think that's a great little phrase you've just dropped in there, is almost as a manager, how do I help them, whoever them is, but to become the best that they can be? I think it's a really nice little phrase, that, Ricky.
Well, I think we've covered everything, certainly everything we wanted to do, and more. And we'll also we'll drop some links to ensure that if you want to access some of the video content, we've also got a couple of things that would be really valuable. We've developed a goal quiz, which, guess what, is built around the Holy Trinity, that you can use with your team, and actually will give you an objective score about how you're feeling, how they're feeling. So feel free to use that. We'll put a link in the description below, as well as the videos. But we've also got a business challenge document, which is basically a comprehensive kind of how to achieve anything you want. So whether it's your business goals, whether it's your personal goals, but fundamentally takes you through a systematic set of activities that lead you to a formalized plan. Unfortunately, it ends with you having to do the work. We can't do that for you. We can set you up for success. What we can't do is push you over the game line and do it for you. That's all on you. But we will, as we do with all of our content, our goal is to set leaders and managers up for success, to help you clear away some of the uncertainty and allow you to perform at the best that you can. And that's ultimately our aim with all of the content that we produce, be it podcast, video, articles, and newsletters that we put on LinkedIn. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, do that. If you're not following us on YouTube, do that, because you've got access to a whole library of useful content in lots of different ways. So
and you might see a face or two you recognise.
Yes, absolutely. So I think brilliant, Graham. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
As always, I enjoy our conversations, and I'm sure viewers have got some real value, some nuggets that they can take away, because everybody will have different bits.
Different things, yeah, good stuff.
Thanks
for that, Ricky.